Hello everyone. In this video we are going to go through the derived characteristics of chordates. So we have four key characteristics of chordates. These are the presence of the notochord, the dorsal hollow nerve cord, the pharyngeal slits or cleft, and the muscular postanal tail. So what we are going to do in the next slides, we are going to go through these characteristics one by one. I'm going to pause here for a second and just highlight something that sometimes this material, especially this slide, may seem not very intuitive, because you may think, okay, we are chordates, we have notochord, we have dorsal hollow nerve cord, but we don't have pharyngeal slits or clefts. So these key characteristics, which are used to classify chordates, in many cases they are seen in the early stages of development, but they are lost later on during further stages of development. So that's something you have to keep in your mind. Even if they are not apparent in the mature stage of the organism, they were there during the early stages, for example, the larva stage of the organism. So let's start with these characteristics one by one, as we said. So starting with the notochord. So the notochord, which you can see here shown in orange color. So this is a longitudinal flexible rod between the digestive tube and the nerve cord. So we have here the nerve cord shown in yellow, and we have here the digestive tube shown in brown, starting with the mouth and ending with the anus, and in between both we have this orange structure, the notochord. So it's a longitudinal flexible rod. It is made of fibrous tissue that extends between the nerve and the digestive, so the nerve cord and the digestive tube, and the reason or the function of the notochord is to provide skeletal support. So in most vertebrate, what happens is that the skeleton will develop around the notochord. So the skeleton will develop around the notochord in most vertebrates. So what is the case with us in humans? So we have the notochord around at week third week in the development, and then it is lost, and what remains of the notochord is the intervertebral discs. So within the bony structures that makes the vertebra, we have those intervertebral discs, and as you can see here, the notochord is there. Remember, it is made of fibrous tissues, so it is doing the role of shock absorbance. So in summary, it provides the skeletal support for the organism. The second characteristic is the presence of the dorsal hollow nerve cord. So this is the dorsal hollow nerve cord shown here in yellow, and this developed from a plate of ectoderm that rolls into a tube. So if you remember, we have three germ tissues or germ layers. So the outermost one, the ectoderm, is the one that is going to develop into the dorsal hollow nerve cord, and it runs into the shape of a tube, and this further will be developed into the central nervous system. So in other words, the brain and the spinal cord. So as you can see here in this image, the dorsal hollow nerve cord, shown here in blue, will develop into the central nervous system, so the brain and the spinal cord. The third characteristic is the presence of pharyngeal slits or cleft. So we are talking about these slits or cleft, and they open to the outside of the body. So they, as we said, they connect between the mouth and the anus. They are part of the digestive tube, and these pharyngeal slits provide opening within the digestive tube to the outside of the body. There are three possible roles for the pharyngeal slits or clefts depending on the organism. So the first of them is to serve the function of being suspension feeding structures. We see this in many invertebrate chordates. So what is going to happen? Water and suspended nutrients will pass through the mouth, and then water will be pushed out through the pharyngeal slits or clefts, and the food materials or the particles of the food will be further absorbed and distributed throughout the body. While in non-tetrapod vertebrates, what we can see is that the pharyngeal slits or cleft will serve the function of gas exchange, so it will develop into the gills. So again, it provides opening within the digestive tube, so water will come in with dissolved oxygen, and then gas exchange will happen, so the uptake of oxygen and the removal of carbon dioxide will take place through the pharyngeal slits. So this is better because water will be removed from here rather than moving all the way around and getting out from the anus. In our case, so in tetrapods, what is the fate of the pharyngeal slit? They are going to develop into parts of the ear, head, and neck. So as you can see, there are different developmental functions or destinations depending on the organism, and this is the one showing the evolutionary history of the pharyngeal slits. So as you can see, in human, they will form the ear, head, and the neck. Moving on, so the fourth characteristic is having muscular PostAnal tail. So this tail contains skeleton elements and muscles. So as you can see here, it's muscular in structure, and this provides propelling force in aquatic species. And why it is mentioned here, it is PostAnal, because sometimes in other non-chordates we may see the tail, but this tail doesn't extend beyond the anus. So the anus is in non-chordates, it extends throughout the length of the body. It is the external structure, but in chordates the tail is going to extend beyond the anus, and this is one characteristic. In human, this tail is going to be dramatically reduced in size during maturation stages. So as you can see here, at early stages we had this PostAnal tail, but it was dramatically reduced in size during later stages of development. So we are going to start with the different subphyla of the chordates, starting with the Cephalocordata. So Cephalocordata, or sometimes referred to as Lancelets, and the name Lancelets comes from the fact that they are blade-like in shape. So these are marine suspension feeders. So what they do, they bury themselves at the bottom of the ocean, and they extend a little bit to the outside and use their cerci to move the water around. So any food material suspended in the water will be uptaken, and then, as you know, the water will go out from the pharyngeal slits and the food particle will continue. So this is the way that they feed themselves. One thing important is that they retain the characteristics of the chordate body plan as adults. So if we see the adult stage, it more or less is exactly similar to the previous image of the general structure of chordates. So they retain the four characteristics that we have mentioned before. Moving on, the second group will be the urochordates. It's also referred to as Tunicates. So these also are marine suspension feeders. They can sometimes be referred to as sea squirts, because literally what they do is that they squirt water. So water goes in, again with suspended nutrients, and the pharynx has these slits, so water will go out and the food particles will be retained and will be pushed throughout the digestive system. One thing I want to highlight is that during the larval stage, they retain the different characteristics of the chordates, but two specific characteristics, and you can compare as well that during the adult stage they differ a little bit than the larval stage. So two specific structures they have lost while they mature is the presence of tail, so this is lost in the adult structure, and the presence of the dorsal hollow nerve cord, so they had the nerve cord in the larva stage, but this is lost during the adult stage. So in this video, I'm going to show you how they squirt the water, and that's why they are called sea squirts. So you can see here how they manage to